playing a game of chicken basically with the kilometres to see how far we could get out of the tank. We're running pretty low, we're about 50 k's south of Nullarbor, and we heard this high-pitched squealing, and the speedo went right round to where probably 90 miles an hour should be. We know the Land Rover can't go that fast, so we pulled over quickly, let it cool down, had some lunch. But it looks like something's happened to the mechanism inside the speedo. So we've disconnected the speedo and cable tied the speedo cable up to the brake line there, and hopefully that'll get us to camp tonight, and we might be able to fix the speedo this evening.
Yeah, we've had some close calls at times. Not my Land Rover, another one. We've done quite a few kilometres with one wheel missing. Yeah, the boss I was working with, he was a bit harsh on his Land Rover and had way too much tyre pressure in his tyres for the conditions, and because he ended up breaking a swivel pin housing. The ball part snapped off at where the flanges that bolted onto the diff housing, and we decided we could get it going again. We was going to abandon it, but it was a long way from nowhere. So I suggested we pull it all apart and tie the actual housing up to the chassis, and just travel slowly. We should be able to get it to where we could get it used.
38 years or so I've had it, it's only let me down once. And there's 3 filters. There's one in the fuel pump, there's one in the carburetor, and there's one in line before the carburetor. And the one in the fuel pump got blocked and no one even knew there was one in there. And when we found out, it just stuck me up in the road, she'd stop and start. But got her home and read up the book and put a new filter in it, and hasn't missed a beat since.
As I awoke from my swag to the stunning scenery on the Australian Bight, I looked at the Land Rover and I couldn't believe it. I'd paid some $400 for the Land Rover 8 years ago, and it had made it. It had made it all this way. Truly inspiring. Right, so we're 25 kilometres this way in South Australia from the Western Australian border. We got to this lovely little campsite here last night. As you can see, absolutely stunning views, and it's a little bit desolate out here, but the weather's pretty good for today. We had a few issues along the way though. The Speedo decided to give up the ghost, and we had to stop and disconnect the Speedo and make up a little temporary arrangement in the engine bay. So the Speedo cable's just sitting there spinning, doing its own thing. So we'll be heading to Cocklebiddy, and we'll be heading down to Twilight Cove and doing a little bit of beach driving along the way. Anyway, we'll catch you there. Right from the trip, it was known as the biggest barrier. This would be the Nullarbor Plain, which is some 77,000 square miles. It is the largest exposed limestone bedrock in the world. It is hard to believe that this dry, hostile place was once a shallow seabed. Small organisms over tens of millions of years formed the calcium much needed to help build the limestone we see today. Though very dry, the Nullarbor hosts some of the most extensive cave systems in Australia, which formed during the Miocene, some 20 million years ago. This has acted as a time capsule and has preserved many artefacts and animal remains. Temperatures today have rose up to 40 degrees centigrade, and we hadn't seen any civilization except for a service station which was some 300 kilometres back down the road. there was no one, just us and the road. This was the longest trip I'd done in the Land Rover. Prior to this adventure, the longest trip I'd done was 300 miles, or 500 kilometres in funny talk. When I bought the Land Rover, it was rather tired. It had spent the last 15 years on a rural property. Mechanically, it wasn't too bad, though the body was rather tired. The chassis needed some work, and the wiring was in a bad way, and it shorted out and caught on fire on the first trip I took it on, though it took 4 years before the trusty vehicle was ready to be registered. Many issues were overcome along the way, replacing the rear cross member, learning how to spray paint a car, rebuilding the transfer case, and much, much more. Though having learnt these vital skills, it has helped to develop a greater peace of mind for myself. As I now know, if something does go wrong, I would have a fair chance of getting myself out of trouble. So we're here at the straight, and by the straight I mean the longest straight in Australia. It's 187 kilometres long. When you've done 50 kilometres off-road and 250 kilometres on-road in a Land Rover Series 2, the brain becomes a little bit, well, how would one say it, a tad fried. The straight is, in funny talk, some 146.6 kilometres long. You can continue now. Or 90 miles, depending on what school you went to. And we're going to be sitting on it for 3.5 hours tomorrow. So we're going to be looking forward to a corner or two by the end of it. We've just come from Cocklebiddy, a little way down the track. And we spent about a day and a half off-road down there, heading to a little place called Twilight Cove. We met some lovely people along the way, Simon and Hillary, who came along with us in their Defender 110. I have to say we're a little bit envious of them here. It would be nice to have enough time, as they do, to do the full loop around Australia in the Land Rover, but we'll just have to see what the future brings. It was pretty interesting terrain though. We were going through some pretty soft sand, and we had some pretty decent ruts and hill climbs to go up too. It's the first time that I've taken the Land Rover on sand, and I have to say I was pretty impressed. The low down torque really does make a big difference, and it certainly compensates for not having as much power as some of the other four-wheel drives out there. We did have a couple issues though along the way. We had a little bit of an overheating issue, but that wasn't too much of an issue in itself. We were able to stop, pop the bonnet, and just talk about Land Rovers until it cooled down, which there's a lot worse ways to spend your time. So from here, we'll hopefully make our way passphrase the range and head up to Kalgoorlie.